I'll issue the welcome to everybody. It's 3:01, so we want to get started. We have a lot of people that are on time. We'll respect everyone's Monday afternoon. Happy Monday afternoon, everybody. It's Nick and Matt here from AA Real Estate Group. We're continuing our discussion, our weekly discussion on COVID-19 and its effects on the economy as well as the real estate game. We ourselves are real estate investors, and we have a real estate brokerage, property management company, a lot of which are on this call. We appreciate our team members very, very much. And we started this by putting out some resources to our own teams, internal teams, contractors, vendors, 1099 employees, the real estate agents, the property managers. And then we realized if we're doing it for our own teams, maybe we try to bring in some professionals and open it up to pretty much everybody, because everybody can benefit from this. So this is a continuation of that discussion. And we welcome you here to joining us today. Matt and I have both put together some stats for you. So we are part of a mastermind group that subscribes to a gentleman named John Burns. And he is the major data collector and consultant for even some of the national lenders like Wells Fargo, Chase Bank, Toll Brothers Development. And he has given us permission to use some of his slides in today's presentation to kind of go through some of the data that he shared with us on a national level. So we're excited to have that. And then towards 3:30-ish, we're going to have Anthony and Ron join us again from Restivo Monacelli to give us an update on the PPP program and also all the CARES Act stimuli, all of the benefits to the 1099s there at that point. So we also wanted to open this up, Matt, if you're right. I mean, how do we want to handle, do we want to have them type in the chat box and then we'll unmute them?
I think that's the easiest way to do it. If you have any questions as we're going along, folks, we want this to be interactive as possible. So by all means, if you have any questions, comments that you want to have answered, just throw them in the chat box. We'll do our best to answer them as we're going along here. We will take a couple of pauses to make sure that we do hit all the questions. There's no such thing as a silly question in this content. We're here to answer your questions when we can. So anytime you guys have a question, just throw it in the chat box and we'll make sure they get answered.
Awesome. And if we do see anybody from Jared, Brianna, or Ron or Anthony, we just have to make them a co-host. I'll keep an eye out too if they join. Want to make sure we get them on. So, all right, welcome everybody. Well, as we always start most of these presentations, we are not, while we are professional real estate brokers, we're not attorneys. We will have a couple CPAs on the call later on, but we are not giving professional advice. Everything you have here, take with a grain of salt. Don't sue us. We're just here to help. That's essentially what the disclaimer here is for. So just a friendly reminder, for those of you who are still on social media or still watching the news, I don't understand why, but this is a friendly reminder as to who we are in this state of crisis, right? So the virus is real and it's out there and we can't see it. Does that mean that we have to live day to day in fear? Not necessarily, right? We're focusing on what we can control versus what we cannot control. And I love this little image because this is kind of what we still refer to day to day on what we can and can't control. Positive attitude, turning off the news, becoming more physically fit, becoming financially more clear as to where we are personally and professionally, doing things to strengthen our relationships, both in our families and our professional relationships. These are all things we can do on a day-to-day basis, which is great. So just a reminder. And for those of you who don't know us or are joining us for the first time this week, we appreciate you being here. Matt and I run a series of different branches. We have a real estate home buying company in Greater Boston and Southern New Hampshire. We have, with my partner Marianne, we have a debt settlement company, Short Sale Mitigation. She's the magic behind the curtain on that. We have an investor-friendly brokerage that both Mass and New Hampshire as well, AA Premier Properties that we work with. We also have a property management arm for, again, New Hampshire and Massachusetts, a coaching and consulting arm of AA Real Estate Mentor, and a investment opportunities and partnerships. So just in case you don't know who we are, that's us. Thank you for registering for this call. Most of you had to go to the website to at least take a look at who we were. But we're not about us. We're really about you guys today. And we're happy to share some of that data that we got from, again, our John Burns, the national data aggregator. And he's literally like the guy that puts out some data and Wells Fargo or Chase sees their data and literally will adjust their lending criteria based on, the data that his firm puts out. So it's a kind of a big deal. We're happy to have his information today. And again, Matt, feel free to just jump in on a few different things. You've seen this presentation as well from him directly. But this is, he added a couple slides in here. And again, these are his slides, not ours. But he added a couple slides in here that this is, one of the greatest pandemics that we've seen in 102 years. Greatest economic contraction since the great.
I was just going to say, let me add a little bit of background on this for folks who don't know who this is. This is a gentleman by the name of Howard Marks. He works for Oak Tree Capital, which is a venture capitalist firm in New York City. He is probably one of the most contrarian people in all of Wall Street in terms of his approach to how he views the world right now. He honestly is one of the guys. He jokes that he has a underground bunker in his property that he will retreat to at a moment's notice. And he's been saying for the last couple of months, he's been living in the bunker. And he was one of the first people to come out back in about February of this year, 2020, saying, this is going to be a problem. Pay attention to what's happening in the world. Pay attention to what's going to happen. And he was in the forefront of it. And his firm is actually probably one of the best and probably strongest well-positioned in the private equity world, in real estate as well, moving forward into the rest of 2020 and probably moving forward in the next couple of years.
That's awesome. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I struggle to actually read the notes on this one, so I appreciate that. I guess we'll this was all of this data that you're about to see is about a week old at this point, and you'll see he gets into week to week changes and trends. But this particular data, so it doesn't mean that Howard Marks is any less relevant here, right? So one of the greatest pandemics in 102 years. This is fear, but this is kind of what he had said. The greatest economic contraction since the Great Depression is what we're seeing here. The greatest oil price decline in the OPEC era and probably ever, and the greatest central bank government intervention of all time. That has happened. So all of that is now fact, right? It's using numbers. It's not fear, it's fact. So we just want you guys to know the state of where we are, right? And despite the fact that, we're all of us here on this call are not going to immediately die if we set foot outside on our front stoop, but these are just where we are economically, right? Bill Gates, I was hoping this one would format correctly. He had some really interesting feedback on this. Matt, did you want to cover this one? If you can even read it, or do you want me to cover this one?
Excuse me, as I'm trying to eat some popcorn in the middle of this too, so I apologize. As most of you people know, Bill Gates actually has spent the last couple of years not devoted to his tech world, but devoted to the health crisis and public health organization side of the globe, essentially. And he has probably been one of the foremost speakers, that is not a doctor, who's been speaking out about how this is going to happen and how he would view what's happening. And his outlook has been, I would say, very aggressive, so to speak, in where he believes and what's going to happen. And he laid it out very quickly right away and said, this is going to last a long time. You have to look at it in terms of multiple phases. And his first phase is the one that we are currently still in right now, which is 10 plus weeks of extreme lockdown with areas just starting to open back up in the first week of May. Now that timeline proved to be relatively accurate, maybe plus or minus a week for various parts of the country. If you've noticed in the past couple of days in headlines, the state of Georgia, my one-time hometown, has opened back up to relatively great aplomb. I thought of actually flying down to visit my high school to go get my hair cut because there are barber shops open in the great city of Atlanta at this point in time. And up here, that doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. And we are all not as fortunate as Nick to be bald at this point in time or have that shaved look. So we're all struggling in various ways and shape and form. And then, of course, phase two is the economic recovery, which is going to last 18 months and be a little bit potentially longer than that, which is the vaccine becomes readily available and people start to interact normally again. Now, depending on what side of the spectrum you believe or sit in, the level of normalcy that we're going to get back to is all personally dependent. It's going to fluctuate different between what you and I, or what Nick and I, or what Nick and you would believe. That's all widely self-created, so to speak. I do believe there is going to be no such thing as a new normal. Everything is going to look different, at least for the next couple of years, if not longer. Everything that we look at in terms of how we shop, how we do sports, how we interact with each other, that is all going to be different. It's going to be somewhat similar, but there are going to be phases of it that not only look different, but feel different. So then how do you translate that back into what we're talking about today, which is the house buying and home buying? And it was very interesting for, of all people, Bill Gates to give a specific idea of what's going to happen in the home buying kind of stratosphere sort of things on his timeline. And he specifically mentions that home buying and the way that we buy and sell houses and the housing market as a collective whole is going to be a very long time till it recovers, until it looks normal, for a variety of different reasons. Not just because we're afraid to interact with one another, but also because of all the different restrictions through various laws, various guidances that different cities and different governments have put into effect that make it harder in some cases for people to buy a house, whether they've been furloughed or whatever the case may be, or lost their job on that side of things, which is tragic, of course, or because of the different economic packages that have been put in place to make sure that people's situation doesn't get worse than it is, whether they're in foreclosure, pre-foreclosure, whatever all that is. All those things come together to create the timeline, which quite frankly is constantly evolving and is becoming more and more clearer on a day-by-day basis.
Absolutely. And if you guys even think about the new normal, as Matt calls it, even the people on this very call, right? So let's say tomorrow, vaccine, it comes out, right? We can all get it in the next 3 months. Now, this is an impossibility, right? But let's assume that's for the case. Are we then all going to immediately start going back out to all of our restaurants and immediately start meeting with, meetings and group clients? There's a lot of people that will still have a little bit of a fear. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be with 100 people in a restaurant. Who washed their hands today? Like, there might be a different normal, right? Of those restaurants that are even still open after we go through this crisis, right? Like, there's lots of changes here that are going to happen. Lots of long-standing changes that the world as we know it economically will never be the same after this. And we are learning how to get through it now day to day. So I'm just going to go through a few of his slides, and then you'll see kind of our big takeaways from the data that I'm about to share with you. We're not going to go through each one individually. We're going to go through a few, and I'm just going to skip through a couple others, but you'll see kind of where we are. Here's the worst spots for the actual virus itself. Deaths reported per 100,000 residents by county. And there we are, right there in the Boston market. We have New York, Boston, a little south of Atlanta there, and New Orleans as the hot spots for this one. Again, this data is a week old. Not sure why Atlanta decided to open back up there, Matt. But, to each their own. And I don't know. I would suggest you not fly down there.
No,
I would not like
planning on
down there.
Nope, not planning on it. It's Atlanta. They embrace crazy. You can't explain it.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like the live free or die of the South. I understand.
Yeah, exactly.
This was an interesting slide, right? Total U.S. payroll employment. This was, so in the past month and a half, 17 million workers have filed for unemployment, which it takes away all the progress that we have made since the last recession. So pretty much all of the progress is now gone, the 17 million, which I found interesting. That was, of course, as per claims. There's lots of people that either have not yet claimed, and some of them are claiming. What we also found, and I found was interesting too, is people in service industries that don't want to subject themselves to this virus. Now, if you file, you get an extra $600 a week or a month. I forget. We'll find it's in the slides here. I forget how much it is. You get an extra $600 for the first 6 weeks of your unemployment. Oh, it's per week. And what that's doing though is it's pushing a lot of the service people up and out. Let's say they're making, $40,000 a year being a nurse tech at an assisted living facility. It's pushing them up and out. If they listen, I don't want to have to deal with COVID. I don't want to deal with what I'm dealing with right now. I'm filing unemployment. I'm now going to be making $52,000 to $54,000 a year, and I can kind of wait all this out. It's causing another consequence that they didn't necessarily see, where a lot of those people are quitting their jobs just to get unemployment. It's causing a service issue, right, in different industries. So we'll go through some industries here in a second, but I thought that was an interesting stat when he shared that. Hardest in industries, and Matt, again, just jump right in if you have anything to share. There's our food service right there at the top, and retail, our top two impacted industries nationally as part of this this virus. And
Now,
we're starting to.
Can you go back for 1 second, Nick? Because there is one thing I want to highlight here, and I think you're looking at it right now, which is the accommodation of food service and retail, excluding online and grocery, being the hardest hit right now. I don't envision that sticking the same. I don't envision that when this is all said and done. I don't envision those numbers staying the same. I think where you're going to see a lot of people in the industries that are going to get hurt the hardest are going to be entertainment and in transportation and travel. The leisure and travel section is going to be absolutely destroyed in this economy right now. Hotels, occupancy rate in our area of Boston has averaged around 85% historically for the last 5 years. I will give credit to anybody who right now in the chat box can tell me what the occupancy is right now, because I can tell you it is at historic lows in Boston, which normally is one of the top 5 in terms of its occupancy and its hotel rates nationally. Just so people are curious, it's at 64% right now occupancy in the hotels of Boston. These hotels are built to be high occupancy. There are a number of projects in Boston that are probably going to grind to a halt because the occupancy numbers are different, and who's going to be coming to Boston. If you look at the Boston Event and Convention Center schedule of events, they've had almost every single one of their major events the rest of the year canceled. So these numbers, I think right now, are what you're seeing. This is what you expect. Nobody's going out to eat, and nobody's going to shop. So these places don't have any other choice right now but to lay people off. So these numbers are going to change, as sadly as it pains me to say that. But when we're looking back at this in a couple of years and economists are doing their studies, and there will be tons of economists winning all kinds of awards studying this time and this place in this particular market. But it is going to look far different with those numbers.
Yeah, it's interesting what's going on. New home supply. Interestingly enough, on this graph, there's no Boston Metro on this graph. Was trying to figure out exactly what was happening locally, but number of actively selling communities, and the red is supply is up 5%, orange is supply is down 8% or more. We're all kind of looking. I'm trying to think. There's a takeaway here, and my notes are being hidden by this box. So here's the data for people. If anybody has a takeaway, awesome. I can
provide what we're seeing nationally, or what we're seeing not nationally here. This is national. Let's take it from the locally perspective. We've actually seen houses from the Warren Group, which is the leading data for real estate here in the greater Boston area, put their data out last week, right in conjunction at the same time John Burns was doing this presentation for us. And it basically says one of two things that are interesting. The average price for a condo in the greater Boston area is more expensive than the average price of a single family home. That has only happened twice in the last 10 years. The last time that happened was in 2016. That's happened again for the first time. So that's a little bit of an interesting part there. And number two, new home sales are now lagging behind basically older built homes for being sold. So people aren't looking for new homes. They're looking for homes that have already been built. That's the fourth time that's happened in the last 10 years. So there's a couple of interesting trends that are coming out here that I think you can really look at data in terms of what's happening and what's going on here. We've seen the new home builds kind of pare themselves back over the last couple of months in the greater Boston area, and existing home sales have gone up, and they've relatively held steady. It's still a buyer's market in terms of lack of inventory, or I should say a seller's market due to lack of inventory, as buyers right now are staying back on the sideline. So all these things are playing out, and they're relatively consistent to what's happening nationally here. As you can see, the supply on this chart that on the side here that Nick has up, supply is down 8% or more in a lot of these different major cities overall versus the supply being up 5%. There are some cities like Indianapolis, Indiana, Portland, Oregon, and to a degree, even Atlanta and Dallas, that have seen such a rapid increase of its population growth that it's needed to build more houses for its workflow forces. Well, if people are moving to one place, they're moving out of one place. And where are those places in particular that have been hurt? And what effect are those places going to be seeing in the next couple of months, and maybe even potentially next couple of years, as we get out of this thing and the economy starts trying to come back to a little bit of a more healthier place?
Yeah. You mentioned the new homes versus existing homes too, Matt. I think that's always a function of an economy of pricing starting to correct, right? Where new homes are just, they're pricing people out of the market, so they're going back to renovations and first-time home buyer markets, right?
Exactly
So
right.
It's interesting for those of you on this that are real estate centric. I know the majority of our network is in the real estate business. We have absolutely revised our buy box. First-time home buyer markets, there will always be trading. There's always going to be people who need to sell their homes and people who need to purchase their homes. There's always going to have that market for life reasons. But there might be less of the luxury market. There might be less of the condo market, especially now when people don't want to have neighbors that are that close, right? If you can sweet spot that, first-time home buyer market, maybe under the price point, if you're in our metro area, under the price point of $550,000 on a resale perspective, I mean, there's always buyers there in every market. That's how I experienced that in 08, 09, and 2010 as well. Three arms of federal government coming to the rescue. This is again John Burns' slide. It's the Fed, it's mortgage policy from the servicers and the central bank, right? So this is kind of what's happening. But here's the challenge, and what he brings up is really, really interesting. Every time the Fed steps in and they provide stimulus, or they provide the CARES Act, or they provide any sort of legislation to try and help the economy continue, right? The big intervention. It helps prop things up temporarily, but is it a long-term fix? It doesn't even hurt the economy long-term, right? And so this is really interesting what he kind of goes through, where here's a rough timeline, right? So second quarter 2020 all the way up to second quarter 2021. There was the family, oh gosh, I forget what that one is too. The credits for people allowing for a 12-week leave and getting paid for it for people who had sicknesses related to COVID in their immediate families, and they allocated $105 billion to employers to help deal with those absences, right?
The Family First Corona Response Act. That's what you're trying to come up with there.
Say it again, Matt.
Family First Corona Response Act, which basically said, if you have anybody in your family that has the coronavirus, we're going to pay you to stay home. That was the very first amount of stimulus that was passed in the government, and that was passed now, but that is going to rapidly come to the end. I believe it's it's right there on your screen. It's coming up in the first week in June, actually.
Yeah, so he has a gradually exit shelter in place. He has at the end of Q2, which would be in June. And then he has this one here for the 12-week leave for those applicants would end roughly in the middle of in July for Q3 there with the federal credits. Then, of course, we have the PPP program, which most of you are familiar with at this point. And there's going to be further updates finally, hopefully some more clarification from Anthony and Ron a little bit later on here in this presentation. But that has been pushed out. But remember, what has it actually done? Most people who filed for unemployment, if they filed for unemployment and now their employers are paying them with this PPP money to try to get the loan forgiven, some people don't want it. Some people would rather take that $600 extra from their unemployment checks and only come back when that runs out, right? And other people, if they are hiring people back temporarily to help with this loan and not be to help for the loan forgiveness, at that point, are they just going to learn, hey, I operated really well without those 2 or 3 employees. After this loan money gets forgiven, I don't need them around. I need to cut the fat, right? So unemployment to rise again after the PPP funds run out and after all the course has run, the 8 weeks has run its course there. Then there's the stimulus check, right? $290 billion of stimulus check. So John has forecasted that most of that will just be put into a savings account, write the $1,200 stimulus check or the $3,000 stimulus check that we received. It's going to be put into a savings account and not used until really Q3 of this year. So has that actually helped or stimulated the economy, or is it just going to be kind of sitting there, which is still good, right? It's good for debt pay down. It's good for whatever we need it for. I still haven't gotten my check yet. I'm a little upset about that. The government has forgotten about me. They have left me behind on that. Listen, I'm all about I've been paying into the system for years. It's time for us, man. It's time for us. That's all I have to say about that. $250 billion in unemployment that were allocated, right? After the 4 months, they lose their $600 a week. There it is, $600 a week bonus after the 4 months time. And then what happens? Especially if they're in one of those service industries that decided that they were just going to not come to work because now they have a higher annual salary and they don't have to deal with COVID while they're on unemployment. Will they have a job when they come back, right? What happens to the actual unemployment numbers there? And the income declines. So people on unemployment, their income is declining, but also the people who are still actively working. What's that actually doing for the companies if they do or don't come back? And do the salaries stay the same or not? Student loan forbearance, that's just a forbearance. As we all know, forbearance is a temporary situation. Payments will ultimately return. And if students have gotten used to not having to pay out those student loans, they're going to be in some trouble, right? Mortgage forbearance. A lot of people who are going through that right now, modify, forgive, or if they can't pay after their 90-day forbearance, right now it's roughly a 3-month forbearance for a lot of mortgage companies that were just kind of blanket approving those for people affected by COVID. That money those payments don't go away, right? I mean, they still owe that money. It's just a matter of how do they pay that back? Is it paid back by tacked onto the back of the loan? Is it paid back within the next 6 months with a higher monthly payment? And can they afford that higher monthly payment if this economy goes back to normal? So the options there are modify the loan, right? Forgive the 90 days, or the banks will start to foreclose on their homeowners once the foreclosure act is lifted. The moratorium is lifted, at least here in Massachusetts and about to be New Hampshire. So it's really interesting that's again a temporary help, but does it help long term? And then the rent forbearance, right? The rent is not actually forgiven unless there's some really giving landlords out there. Again, mortgages still have to be paid, taxes, insurance, the maintenance and the management of that building, the pest control still has to be called out, like whatever it is. And what is the opportunity there? Well, they modify leases, they forgive it to their tenants, or the landlord gets foreclosed on, once again, putting them in a tough position. What does this mean for inventory? In maybe 6 months, maybe 9 months, maybe 12 months, maybe 18 months. I don't know the timing of this. I'm just saying that it's not an if, it's pretty much a when this happens. There's going to be a lot of distressed inventory back on the markets. And real estate agents, real estate investors, all vendors and debt mitigation companies, people have to be aware, and we have to be in a position to impact as many of these sellers as we can and help serve them while at the same time being ready for what's about to occur. So there's a lot of slides here in his market pulse. I'm not going to touch on all of them, but this is a supply demand curves he's got. So goods and services demand by industry. And this is kind of a rough overview as to all of them. The green, if you start at the bottom and work your way up, right? 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, and then current, if you see the level of green going up, that means the demand has increased over the past 3 weeks, right? And that's kind of the easiest way to read these charts. So 10, 10, and 11, this is all, there's been, as you see, we're not going to touch on a lot of these graphs because ultimately there's not a ton of change happening as of yet, okay? So here's a couple of demand by industry, and you can see the biggest change, private equity, right? And why is that? Well, they reached out to their lenders. Well, any lenders backed by Wall Street, as Matt and I found, were drying up by the hour over the last several weeks. So when those lenders are dried up by the hour and they were getting margin calls on their own loans, they have to go to private equity. There's no other place to go. So you go to private equity companies or those larger Pier Street's bridge funding. This is not just for real estate, but it's kind of across the board. Their demand significantly was high at the 32%. And this isn't the trend. I'm going to show you guys some of the trends here.
Well, can we just go back to that slide for 1 second, Nick? And I think there's something fascinating to look at. Look at the waterfall effect as this goes down. You start with private equity on top. Then you go, well, okay, Who does private equity assist? Lenders. Who do lenders assist? Public builders. All the way on down. There's a direct waterfall effect and a domino effect across the board there. Private builders, they're primarily doing single family rentals. They're doing large apartment complex. They're building products. They're developers. They're apartments. There's a massive domino effect where this is quite literally being felt all the way on down through the entire investment ecosystem, to use the correct terminology there. It's fascinating when you look at something like this to say and see where it's decreasing all the way on down, or in some cases increasing at not quite the same level of fortitude that has been the last year or so.
Yep, for sure. Just checking to see if Anthony or Ron too have joined us at this point too. Moving into goods and services, again, I'm not gonna, this is where you look at the trends though. Start to look at that green bar at the beginning, right? 4, 6, 9, 2 weeks, 1 week current. That's the demand for development, demand for private builds, demand for public builds. There's a lot to be said about some of these things. Here's the green curve for capital, right? This one I found interesting. For investment funds, right? The demand actually went down to 13. Lenders about the same, 21% from 2 weeks ago to now. Private equity, there it is, 19% 2 weeks ago to 32% demand now. And again, this data is about a week and a half old, so beware of that. Whatever it is now, I'm seeing we're going to see significant more changes as we move forward. There hasn't been a lot of these changes that have occurred yet that we are about to see. Here's tenants. The demand for renters for apartments. The demand for apartments was at 17% 2 weeks ago, and now down to 5%. Again, this is a week and a half ago data. And single family rentals, the demand 15% down to 10%. We're hearing that has now changed, especially single family rentals. We're hearing now the demand for that has skyrocketed, right? Because people would rather not live in apartment complexes with lots of people around. I know locally, the local Avalon complex has just, mandated a stay in place and everyone wears a mask order. So people would rather have their own single family house to at least feel like they have their own space, which I found interesting. Building products about the same. People still needing to fix things and do things and buy things and build things. Here's listings. Here's we get into listings. Matt, did you want to take this one as well?
Yeah, and I also saw that Ron and Anthony are in here. So if you want to, while I'm talking on this, if you want to go ahead and make them the co-hosts here, they just popped in. We were kind of touching on this a few slides ago, maybe 10, 15 minutes ago, for those of you who just joined. And we will be making this recording available to everyone on this call as well. So if you joined us late and you missed the beginning of it, don't worry, you'll have a chance to go back and watch this back. But this is kind of what we've seen in terms of where new listings are. Going into the spring market, everybody said it was going to be all the real estate economic forecast people were saying this is going to be one of the best spring markets we've had in years. It was a warm winter across the country. Not a lot of people affected by heavy winters. There's pent up demand for everybody to try and sell their house or move to a bigger house. Jobs were doing great. And then all of a sudden, February and March hit, and our world was completely turned upside down. Now, if you look at where we are, this is, again, keeping in mind, this is a national statistics. These aren't just in our Boston market. So bear that out. There are numbers that come out that do show that active number of listings are down in the greater Boston area. They are not down 38%, but they are down, and it's across the board. I have actually not seen in any of the 50 largest metro markets in the US, I have not seen one market that has had more new listings in the month of March and in the month of April than there were at this point in time in 2019. So it's just going to show you right now, people's mindset are to basically, quite literally, to continue to shelter where they are and not think about wanting to move. Now, all that is probably likely to change once there is good news. People have spent a lot of time in their home. People have spent a lot of time nitpicking their home and thinking about where they want to get to next. So whenever this thing does open back up and people are able to venture back outside on a normal basis, we're going to see these numbers probably go in the more positive direction. I think they'll still be down. I don't think they'll be down nationally 38%. I was talking to a friend of mine who's actually a real estate agent in the city of Atlanta, and he was saying today was his busiest day in the entire last 3 months. He had 21 showing requests today through the weekend after people went to open houses and were able to get back to normal to take a look at things and people were out. As more cities come back online and open their doors back up, I really do think people are going to come out of their homes and say, it's time for me to sell my home. I spent enough time in here the last couple of months. I hate my home. I want out.
Interesting enough. Searches, searches are obviously, I think those are down significantly. I can't read my notes here, but sorry. Got kids, contractors, everything in the house here. Essential employees. And resale list prices. Again, man, I can't read my notes on this one. You want to touch on this one too?
Yeah, so what we're talking about here is when we're talking about, again, keeping in mind, this is national. This isn't just Boston. This is national, so the numbers are a little bit skewed. So again, keep that in mind when you're looking at it. We want to give context to everything that we're looking at when we're talking about numbers here. When we're looking at median list prices, what we're taking a look at is we're showing you that as things have kind of gone on and as this thing has drawn on, bear in mind that I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was the second week. And I was trying to remember the exact day, but it was the second week in March where things changed on a dime. When the first NBA player was diagnosed with COVID-19, that night it was when literally the U.S. just decided, nope, we're done. NBA shut down, all the sports shut down. Things took a turn at that point in time. Take a look at what happened to the median home price. Up until that point in time, and it's probably for sake of argument, let's call it that week of March 13th. Home prices were only escalating. Then the next week they held steady. Then look what happened. Like a cliff going back in the opposite direction. And this is where we're seeing home prices are now down. And this is not just nationally. This is Boston. This is greater Boston. But again, this is national numbers here. So compare that again. Numbers are falling year over year, 1%. So when we were talking just a few moments ago about how we're building into our ARVs for our value and we're evaluating something, we aren't going with that high number anymore. We're giving more credence to look at the low number, especially something that's sold within the last 2 to 3 months, to really look at it and say, maybe we don't look at that number that was sold or that sold back in January or February, but what's sold in maybe late February, maybe late March, and giving credence to those numbers, because you're starting to see that resale prices are starting to take a dip here. And I really think that that trend is going to continue as well.
Interesting. And here's loans and forbearance as a percent of the servicing portfolio. So this becomes a much more deeper conversation, which we won't get into today, though, on banks and how much reserve they need and what qualifies as to what allows them to sell in the secondary market versus what allows them to not be able to sell in the secondary market, which stops pretty much all trading of mortgage securities, and that creates a huge liquidity issue, which we're kind of already facing, right? But interestingly enough, again, the Ginnie Mae, we're at 5.9% from March 30th versus 4.3%. I'm just looking at Ginnie Mae only, 4.3 to 5.9% on the Ginnie Mae loans, from 0.09 to 2.4% on Fannie and Freddie, and 2.7 to 3.7, just 1% on the total of the forbearance. So that's forbearance. That's the people who have opted not to pay 30, 60, or 90 days worth of mortgage payments nationally. That's what this is here. And I can't quite even read this slide again because of all the controls I have here. What's this one here, Matt?
Apartment defaults were about 7% this month. That's revised up from 9%. What we're talking about here is we're talking about landlords who have been in default. Now, the people who economic real estate forecasters said were going to be hardest hit the most were the landlords, because they figured, well, quite frankly, it's very simple. It's, again, that domino effect that we talked about. People aren't paying their rent. Landlords can't afford to pay their mortgages. Bing, bang, boom, they end up in default. Simple enough. But that's actually proved not to be the case. We got to give some landlords credit that they were able to forecast and build back those reserves to be able to weather this type of storm. But these numbers, I think the 9%, and Johnny even touched upon this on the call 2 weeks ago. that these numbers are probably going to be changing. In particular, the higher areas of focus for him are North Carolina and Texas, because there's where demand has just gone through the roof the last couple of years, in particular the Raleigh and Charlotte areas in North Carolina, and then in Texas in the Dallas, Fort Worth, and San Antonio, as they call it, areas. Those areas right now aren't seeing a lot of apartment distress. A lot of landlords are saying, we're good, I'm good, everybody's good. I'm collecting not enough rent, so to speak, of what I would like to see, but I'm still collecting enough rent to pay the mortgage. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And we also have to keep in mind, and I think you're going to hear this term more and more, which is economic occupancy, which is the percent paying versus the physical occupancy, which is the percent occupied. The standard over the last couple of years, and actually for as long as I can remember, is the physical occupancy, the number of actual renters or leases that are signed in a unit. Say you have 100 doors in your apartment complex, you have 90 of them occupied, you're at 90% occupied. Well, now people are paying attention to the economic occupancy, which says if you have 90 of those occupied units, 90 of them are occupied, but only 75% are paying, it's not 75% occupancy. You're taking that 75 tenants of that 90, and that's going to change the number. So I think a lot of people in the next couple of months are going to add in that caveat of what is the economic occupancy and not just the plain old-fashioned physical occupancy.
Yeah, and for those buyers of multifamily and people who are looking to get loans on multifamily, which is really the critical function right now, we've always built in like a 5% and 5% in our underwriting sheet, of 5% physical and 5% economic, meaning that of the 95% in that building, 5% of them, hit or miss on whether they'll pay rent that month. Lenders are now lenders have changed their lending criteria big time. And so we as a buyer also had to modify our criteria big time. What Matt was saying is that, okay, if the physical occupancy for that area is measured at 95% or 90%, typically right now it'd be 95% of that area. But economic is no longer just another 5%. Economic might now be, only 70% of that 95, right? So you have to find out from your lender. I mean, if you haven't already been hearing us beating this drum for a few weeks now, like you got to be maintaining relationships with your lenders, commercial lenders. What are they lending on, if they're lending at all? Because many of them have stopped lending while they're figuring this out, stopped their long-term rental lendings. So what are they lending on? What numbers do you have to put into your spreadsheets to then sell to them to make sure that you get you can get a product, a long-term financing product that makes sense for you, while you're dealing with this issue with your tenants and evictions as well. So our take on it, just to finish up our segment, as you can see, this is not just a short-term thing. We're all not going to go back to normal here in about a month to a month and a half. Like the economy is going to be impacted long after that this virus flattens out. And we're here to sort of, again, our commitment to you is to try to help you be prepared for that in whatever your industry might be. Again, we're focused a lot on real estate, but it doesn't mean that you can't be prepared in your own industry. Unless you're in restaurant business, I can't help you at all if that's the case. Housing is not feeling much of a change yet. So again, inventory is still very low, pricing is still very strong, but what we have seen is the methodology for selling homes in this market has completely changed, right? With making sure PPE is all being worn and followed, making sure that everything's a lot of virtual, a lot of warnings being put out. A lot of clients don't want anybody in their homes, or if they're in their homes, they need to be leaving. We had Andrea do her presentation, one of our agents, and everything's now virtual. Let's leave all the lights on. Don't touch doors. Leave doors open. Leave cabinet doors open. Closet doors open. Leave booties at the door. Like anything you can do to prevent contact. Right. So the change in real estate specifically, people will always need to buy and sell, but how we buy and sell homes has already changed as we know it. Mobile notaries were just passed. Right. What does that even mean? We're not attorneys here, but I heard they have to subscribe to some electronic program, and they're not really rolling that out as quickly as they hope to.
The long and short of it there, folks, just to put a button on that, is innovation right now. If this is something that if you're a real estate agent or tangentially connected to the real estate industry and you've been slow to adopt, there is time to catch up. there is time to figure out what you can do here. And the ones who are innovative right now and are figuring out what that looks like and what way they can position themselves with sellers and with buyers to a degree as well are going to be the ones who best position themselves probably for the next couple of years, because you're going to be ahead of the curve. Those who are slowly kind of catching on to it and aren't embracing all the uses that technology has and everything that we can do with our phones, those are the people right now who are going to be kind of left behind as this game moves on here the next couple of months.
Nailed it. You nailed it. The only other piece of data point I wanted to add, a huge props to our own Lori G and Joe McGranigan, because we are at, for the people who were going to pay rent and that had been paying rent prior, we're at 100% of those people. But that said, nationally, it shows that as well, where, rental payments were only down, I think, to there's 7% loss on rental payments nationally. But what does it mean for the May 1st collection date, right? People now for the month of April have been impacted, maybe even more so than March. So we're kind of keeping an eye on what does this mean? What is going to happen on May 1st? And our best line of defense, just like yours, is communication, right? Control that communication, control the messaging to your residents, if you have landlord clients, if you represent owners, if you're a turnkey provider, if you're a vendor, control the conversation and make sure you're coming at it a place from service and how can you help? Really the squeaky wheel that's willing to work with people through this are the ones who are going to get taken care of beyond anyone who tries to take a hard stance on it. Okay, that said, just a couple of reminders, right? This too shall pass. And I talked to you guys a couple of weeks ago about the 3, 2, 1, take a break, take a breath, turn off social media, turn off the news. You don't need it. Focus on your business in this time and on your loved ones, fostering your relationships, making, you can use those bands and even just some push-ups and get yourself in physically fit mode. And you can set yourself up to dominate whatever your business, being it construction, being it solar, being it lending. Set up yourself to dominate and be the light after this lifts. They've been waiting patiently. Anthony and Ron, I think, have joined us, and they are going to now be giving up the highlights. I just have this old presentation. So guys, if you are there, raise your hand, and what we will do is give you guys remote control act. Do you guys have your own presentation? If so, hit the share button, and you should be able to share your presentation right from your computers. You got to unmute you guys first. You guys unmuted? Let me try to unmute you guys. Anthony, you're there. You're unmuted. You there?
I'm here.
Awesome. Do you guys have a presentation this time around, or is it just going to be verbal?
I have no slides today. I think it's just going to be a top-level discussion, but
Gotcha. All right.
Hey Nick, hey group. I figured today we don't have a ton to update, but I want to keep the dialogue going and kind of give you guys an idea of what we're seeing out there. I've been on the phone a lot today with several different banks. What I'm hearing right now is for the PPP application, the SBA is accepting 15,000 applications a day. And that's what they're going to limit it to, so it doesn't overflow the SBA. And right now I went on to the EIDL website, and they're no longer accepting applications for the EIDL.
Got it.
Now, I know the CARES Act, the part of the bill that they passed last week, the $484 billion bill, some of the funds were appropriated to the PPP, and then some were appropriated to the EIDL. From what I've understood, and I've talked to a number of people, that EIDL program is so oversubscribed. They anticipate the money for the new money for the EIDL program to be gone in 24 to 48 hours. It's just, there's so many people that not only signed up for it, but also signed up for the $10,000 emergency grant that they do not anticipate any new applications for the EIDL. So I think they've shut off the applications. To give you guys an idea, I was on the phone with a national branch earlier today, and they were the ones walking me through the $15,000 SBA applications. And they said, it's kind of unfortunate because right now in our queue, we have 200,000 applications, and that was just one bank. And they said the SBA is only accepting 15,000 a day. So what they did, where Congress was a little bit wise this time, is they appropriated a lot of funds. I think it was up to 60 billion to local banks, so that people like sole proprietors, contractors, stuff like that weren't left out this time, because pretty much what happened last time is most of the funds were used up before those type of employees and employers were able to even apply for this PPP program. So hopefully this time around, more smaller businesses are able to get access to the funds. I do know that there's been some frequently asked questions posted to the Treasury website, and they're trying to go back to a lot of these publicly traded companies and ask them to put some of the money that they've already received back into the program. I think what we talked about last time, there was a company, Shake Shack. They got a $10 million loan. They ended up putting that back.
Or the one that I had to laugh at today, Ron, the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah.
$6 million that they're giving back.
So they're going back to a lot of these large companies to give it back. And once they give it back, it will go through the cycle and more people will be able to access those funds. But to be honest with you, there are companies that are saying, no, we're not giving it back. Because at the time when you guys implemented this program, it was available for everybody. And we went on the guidance that you guys posted. And to give you guys a little bit of a laugh on kind of how far the SBA has been behind on this, on April 24th, which was Friday, they released guidance titled, How to Calculate Maximum Loan Amounts by Business Type. Now, that was only 21 days late than what we needed it. So the SBA has been extremely behind on giving guidance on this. They've been behind kind of every step of the way. The only good thing that's happened this time around is that Congress did appropriate some funds to go to smaller regional banks to allow sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed individuals, a little bit quicker access to the cash. I do anticipate that it will take a little bit longer, seeing as they're only allowing 15,000 applications a day. So I do anticipate that we should get some guidance as far as how this covered period is going to get extended a little bit. If everyone remembers, February 15th to June 30th was a quote unquote covered period in the CARES Act. I anticipate, because of these delays and the limiting of the amount of applications, that covered period may end up getting extended. And then what we're also hearing is there's a lot of lobbying to get that covered period to bring the employees back also extended, because we have a lot of hospitality clients such as hotels, and they are not anticipating a lot of occupancy in these hotels until 2021.
We actually just talked about that not even 15, 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, so they're not anticipating occupancy until 2021. So they're not going to hire a lot of these employees back by June 30th. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating everything, but so they're asking for a delay in that time that they have to hire those employees back and also utilize the funds in that 8-week period. My guess is it would be only limited to certain hospitality and restaurant services type deal, where who's really still going to be impacted by this going forward. But that's what we're hearing. They're trying to really lobby hard for that right now.
One question, Ron, that Kathy Shuck asked the question in the chat box, but it's a question I've seen all over social media. I'm trying to stay off social media as best I can, but every time I log on, I'm seeing this time and time again from people saying they've applied, they've been approved, they've got information, but they haven't gotten the money yet from insert bank here, insert financial institution here. There really isn't sort of any guidance that any of these banks are giving anybody about when they can expect the funding for these kind of things. It's just kind of one day it's not going to be there, the next day it's going to be there. Is that kind of the best that you can, or that you're telling your clients when they hear that they're approved?
So what we're hearing right now is that upon approval and upon approval from the SBA and upon approval from the bank getting the recognition from the SBA that it's okay to disperse the funds, that should take 10 days. But the time from when you apply to when that happens has been a lot longer than anticipated. And I anticipate that it will be even longer this time around because, again, the limiting of those number of applications. I can tell you, like, we have clients that are from the first round that got approval but still haven't been funded yet. So my guess is those clients are going to get funded before the people who applied today are going to get funded. So unfortunately, it's not the quickest process. I agree with you there. I would say, though, for those of you that are on unemployment, from my understanding, you still can be on unemployment until you get those funds as a PPP loan. So continue to collect unemployment benefits, but once you get that PPP loan, you're supposed to be off of unemployment.
Got it. Excellent. There's a few other questions kind of hitting the chat here.
One that we just got was, I got an email from the SBA saying only pay $1,000 employee for EIDL, but they didn't give me the next steps on what to do. Ron, in a situation like that, what would you advise somebody to, or is there a kick they can make to go back and get more documents, more paperwork, or it's best for them to take another course of action there?
So, Anthony, you can jump in here because I know you were dealing a little bit with the EIDL, but I'm assuming the question is from the emergency grant because I think they changed the emergency grant from going to $10,000 to $1,000 per employee up to $10,000.
Right. That's right. Yeah. If you're kind of in that that waiting game in a sense where if you have a loan number, unfortunately, I think you have a couple options. One is to just sit tight and wait for the funding, and then two, you could seek some other course of action like you recommended, whether it be PPP loan or unemployment or something to that effect. But if you have a loan number, I think it's just going to take time, and I presume that that's what you're referencing by the fact that you got an email from the SBA. But Ron's right with the limitation. It's $1,000 per employee, up to 10 for the EIDL loan.
And looking in the chat, I see someone who applied to Citizens Bank. Citizens Bank had a huge problem where they were double funding these loans.
Yes,
So
there are going to be some fascinating repercussions for that, I believe, in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, so I don't know how it happened. I've had a call into a banking relationship I have at Citizens, and he hasn't gotten back to me. So I'm sure they're scrambling on their end to see why these all got double funded, so to speak. But it's just odd that some people aren't getting it and then some people are getting it twice. I would say if anyone on this seminar is receiving a double funded loan, make sure you pay that.
Yeah.
Pay one of them back as soon as possible.
Another good question that we had is, as an independent contractor who got the PPP last week and I will pay myself, do you have any guidance on documentation and what processes I should be following on ensuring that we get the forgiveness to our of the loan?
Yeah, Anthony, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would say if you're a self-employed individual and you receive the funding, first of all, bravo. I haven't heard of anyone self-employed that's gotten funding, so that's great. Two, I would say I would recommend, if you haven't already, set up a new separate bank account under the name of your LLC, or if you're a sole proprietor, just in your own personal name. And if the funds are already deposited into one of your other business accounts, I'd recommend just transferring that exact amount over, just so you have a paper trail. And then from there, you want to use that account to basically fund the quote unquote owner's compensation replacement, rent, utilities, any qualifying costs that you're going to incur under that PPP loan guidance. So essentially you can go to the bank and simply remit 2 months of bank statements. The 8 weeks is 2 months, and basically have documentation from money in and everything that went out. And the bank statements should have copies of checks, and so that should be all inclusive. But if you've gotten the funding, I would try to do that as soon as possible if you haven't already.
Anthony, just to kind of take that a step further, is there anything that you would advise to making sure that everything that you're doing financially in this particular situation is documented, and that there's no such thing in this case as over documentation?
Yeah, so I mean, I would make sure that you have, like I said, just that one account where the funds are deposited or transferred to, and then everything out of that account should be for qualifying costs. And then to the best of your ability, I would try to maintain copies of checks, maybe even perhaps some sort of summary, possibly categorizing all of the expenses and, check detail from that account, just so you can go back to the lender and remit that detail and say, here's what I was approved for, here's when it was deposited, here's the next 2 months and all the transactions that I've classified as, these qualifying costs, and then you just go from there. I think that's all you can do.
Matt, that's a great point. Over documentation, there's no such thing in this thing, is to make sure that you can document invoices, bank statements, canceled checks. We saw how much of a mess it was first time around to get the loan. I think it's going to be even more difficult to get the loan forgiven because the banks do have to certify that as well. So, and I can tell you right now, every bank, just based on knowing how this process has gone, every bank's going to ask for a little bit, something a little different. So over document. This is a huge win for taxpayers as long as they can get this forgiven on a tax-free basis. So over documentation goes a long way here.
Is there anything else that you guys are seeing, or when you're talking to, that you're kind of going back and looking at it in terms of what people are seeing and what people are talking about now, and what trends have you seen in particular in the last week or so that maybe is good advice that you would give to everybody?
Again, the biggest advice I would say is have good records with this loan. That's going to be so crucial on the back end of this thing, is to make sure that you have you can substantiate all the costs. We're dealing with a couple of clients right now that they got their loan and they never reached out to us and told us that. And one guy took all the money and put it into his personal checking account. And I'm saying, man, that's not really what this program was for. So again, I think we'll be okay on that particular client that we're trying to scramble and kind of set up a new account and substantiate the documentation. But I can't stress enough as far as making sure, if you have W-2 employees, make sure you have the payroll journals for the next 8 weeks. For rent, make sure you have the rent invoice. For utilities, make sure you have the utilities invoices. For self-employed individuals, all of these rent utilities need to have been in service in 2019. So make sure that you can justify that these were on your 2019 Schedule C. The documentation is going to be huge. As far as trends, it's tough to, I haven't seen much as far as trends, and I haven't seen as much as how much this is actually going to help the economy. Again, I think we're in Rhode Island right now. Things are actually looking good, but Massachusetts still looks like it's still in the thick of things right now. So I've heard that there's going to be a stimulus part 2, because again, what Congress's fear is, all right, 8 weeks, everyone goes back to work. The economy is not just going to turn back on the way it was. Again, I don't know how you guys might have talked about this earlier in the real estate industry. I don't see, I haven't seen as big of a slowdown in the real estate industry as I've seen in other industries. But again, I don't think it's going to be like it was in 2019 towards the end, where things were really, really looking good. I think it's going to take some time to get up there. So I think you'll see another stimulus package come down the pipeline. And a lot of that stimulus package might be for state and local governments, because again, a lot of these funds have dried up at the state level, and roads still need to be repaired. There's still a lot of infrastructure that needs to be fixed at the state and local level.
The
Obviously,
other thing the other thing you can mention in that too, Anthony, is the schools too, or Ron, as well as the school system now, because there's no retail. So those tax dollars that have been generated are hurting right now. So
it's hurting, and a lot of these,
Yeah.
some of these businesses, it sucks to say this, they're not going to come back.
No.
Some of these businesses are not going to be able to come back from this, and they could be in a local government that's paying taxes that government's now not getting those tax revenues from. So,
I'm curious to hear what you would advise in a hypothetical world. If you had a client who came to you guys and said, you know what, I'm not applying for this PP or the EIDL right now. I'm fine. Everything's been good. Just keep passing these stimulus, packages. I'm going to keep getting money. Everything's going to work out. It's all going to be fine. Are you guys advising folks like that? It's probably best that we just kind of poke around and see what's available to you, or are you just letting those people continue to operate in that system and in that mode?
excellent question. I'll give you a little bit of a story here. We have a guy. He's an insurance broker. He's the nicest guy, the most honest guy I think I've ever met in my life. He made me change his return because his charitable contributions were off $10. So he said, you know what, guys, I'm going to do good. My insurance policies, they keep renewing. I get my fees from the renewals. I really don't want to apply for this. There's other people out there that probably could use the money more than I can. And then I went back to him and I really stressed that he should apply for this because, again, the government is assuming that this is all going to be for 8 weeks and we're going to be back up and running again. And I told them, I just don't see the economy turning on just like that right away. I think people are going to be cautious about spending, especially right when they get back. I don't think a lot of people are going to be buying huge insurance policies right now because, again, everything's just so uncertain in life right now that they might not be buying those huge insurance policies because they might need to be utilizing the money for other things. So I stressed and told him the PPP loan, even though there's other people that need it, it's for everybody. So go out, apply for it, try to get the money. Worst case, if for some reason you didn't need the money and you want to be a good-hearted citizen, you can just pay the money back. But protect yourself, go get the money, and don't be a pig about it. I mean, use the money for what it's intended for. Use it for the operating costs to keep the business going so you don't have to lay off your employees or so you can make your bill payments.
That's good. I just literally, when you guys were chatting, I got a call from a DCU who we filed our PPP with, and he just gave me some disheartening news where I guess because everyone's submitting today, the SBA website is running about a 2-hour lag per application.
Geez, yeah.
That 15,000 applications per day is, who knows if they'll even get to 100 at this point. So we'll find out what happens.
Yeah, I do know there was problems this morning. It was shut down this morning. So, again, I think it's going to take a lot longer second time around than the first time around. I think there's going to be a little bit more scrutiny on who's getting these loans from the banks and also from the SBA. So, which I think is a good thing for small businesses because I think there'll be more funds available for everyone on this webinar, and they'll hopefully the publicly traded companies, the Los Angeles Lakers, I think they can find some money elsewhere to
Yeah, I think they'll be just fine.
to pay LeBron James' salary.
That's excellent. I posted in the chat if anyone has anything for Anthony and Ron, or even in general they wanted to chat about, to feel free to come back in. Anthony and Ron, once again, we really, really appreciate these check-ins. I know you guys are very busy, especially with what's going on, and it's a huge deal to have you guys on here and still chatting and providing those updates.
Yeah, we appreciate coming on. The biggest thing that we're waiting on right now is some guidance on the loan forgiveness piece that we're hoping to. It was supposedly supposed to be out on Sunday, but I didn't see it. So once we get that loan forgiveness piece and how that's going to work on some of the questions that we have, we'll put some more slides together to present to the group.
That would be awesome. Yeah, that would be really, really good. And if we're still going to be as our commitment to, I guess, to our network, we're still going to be continuing these on a weekly basis, at least for the foreseeable future. We'll tell you guys when we stop. But again, Mondays at 3:00. We keep trying to come back here. And yeah, Anthony, Ron, thank you. If you you have to come on later, or we'll try to accommodate you guys, because we really appreciate you sharing what you're sharing. That's really good.
Yeah, no, this time works out well for us. We just had a little bit of today. All the PPP loans opened up today, so it was a little hectic. So we knew we were going to be on a little bit later today, but it's great. The group's been pretty good with their questions, and we're happy to help. So.
Oh, awesome. Fantastic. And folks, just to get through some of these last slides, upcoming events, we do have the weekly Black Diamond COVID call tomorrow evening, Zoom call, 6 p.m. You can go, that's going to be, again, a little bit more on this data that you saw tonight. And we're also going to have an update from Rich Vetstein on the moratorium, eviction and foreclosure moratorium, and what he's doing to help fight that in the great state of Massachusetts. And if you guys can go, that's a free meeting, blackdiamondrei.com to register on that. And is anyone, let's see, feel free to take a look at the questions there. Do we have any more?
Well, the question there is, people ask, we are going to be doing more of these. If you signed up for this one, it is unfortunately only a one-time thing. As you can see, this is actually a perfect segue. Follow us on social media. Follow us on Facebook. Primarily, big shout out to Brianna, our team member, who's going to put everything out there on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you, Brianna, for everything you're doing there. Join our meetup group. We're going to be posting all the events. As Nick said, we are going to be doing this once a week moving forward. But we're also going to try to do a better job updating you guys through the course of the week as well, through video, sorts of things of that sort. So make sure, if you don't follow us on Facebook, follow us on Facebook, AA Real Estate Mentor and AA Real Estate Group. Those are our two places. And then anything that we put on Instagram automatically will go to Facebook as well. But follow us on our channels. Stay connected to us. We want to be able to help you guys as best we can. Any questions that you guys have, put on those places as well. So when we do these webinars, we have stuff already ready to go. We can ask the people who we need to go ahead and do. But we so do appreciate each and every one of you joining us and taking some time out of your days to come spend some time with us. It means the world to us, and we so do appreciate it.
Absolutely. I guess in that, we will we'll end today. We cut everybody just a little bit over an hour. Ron and Anthony, again, thank you very, very much, guys, for everything you do.
Take care, guys.
You got it. And everybody else, have an amazing start to your week. Remember to breathe. Remember to turn off social media. Remember to turn off the news and focus on you, your business. What can you do now to make yourself better and prepared for what happens next? See you guys next week.
Thank you, everybody.